I was born to the sound of steel screaming against the wind, a sound so constant that silence would later feel like a threat rather than a comfort. My first memory was not of a sky painted in blue or stars scattered across darkness, but of a ceiling threaded with glowing rail conduits that pulsed like mechanical veins above my crib. The red eagle had been moving long before I opened my eyes, and it never paused to acknowledge my arrival. Motion was not simply transportation, it was survival, doctrine, inheritance, and unspoken fear woven into every waking hour. Generations lived and died within these carriages, their ashes scattered into recycler chambers that fed hydroponic farms glowing in artificial sunlight. Children learned balance before language because the subtle sway of constant acceleration shaped our bones as much as gravity ever could. The windows stretched across entire decks, wide and inviting, framing the world as it raced past us in blurred majesty. Neon megastructures rose like frozen lightning bolts from distant horizons, their silhouettes softened by drifting clouds that never quite behaved like clouds should. We were told the outside was dangerous but beautiful, wounded but recovering. Teachers spoke of oceans cleansing themselves and forests reclaiming cities, and we believed them because belief required less energy than doubt. My name is Yuna, mechanic apprentice by duty and scavenger by instinct. I grew up tracing my fingers along exposed conduits, listening to the rhythm of the engine core like others might listen to lullabies. Insecurity lived beneath my confidence like a shadow stitched to my spine. I could dismantle a turbine assembly blindfolded, yet I could not silence the question that returned each night: if the train stopped, would I still exist? Claire was born minutes after me in the same infirmary carriage, her first cry overlapping mine like a harmony neither of us remembered. She believed in Earth with a certainty so bright it hurt to look at directly, convinced that one day we would step onto soil that did not vibrate beneath our boots. She collected fragments of outdated maps from archive storage, studying continents she had never touched. When the train climbed the luminous nano-track toward the moon, she pressed her palm to the window and whispered that Earth was waiting for us to come home. The red eagle bore the emblem of a crimson mechanical eagle with wings perpetually aflame, a symbol of vigilance and defiance. The emblem glowed above the central plaza, its light reflecting in thousands of eyes that had never seen a sunrise outside tempered glass. We traveled across oceans suspended on luminous nanotracks spun from decentralized quantum nodes that anchored continents, connected the moon, and extended toward Mars. The tracks shimmered beneath us like threads pulled tight across the cosmos, too delicate in appearance to support the weight of civilization, yet impossibly strong. Sometimes other trains appeared on parallel routes, their silhouettes emerging from the haze like migrating beasts. When compatible, they attached mid-motion, clamps locking with thunderous force as trade and conversation flowed between strangers who shared the same prison of velocity. Other times, attachment meant violence. The day Scorpion appeared, the horizon did not brighten with opportunity but darkened with intent. Its segmented hull curved upward in a metallic arc, armored plates layered like a predator's exoskeleton, and sparks cascaded from its flank as it matched our speed. Alarms howled through the Red Eagle, echoing down corridors lined with habitation units and hydroponic gardens. I felt the vibration of Scorpion's docking clamps extending before the impact reverberated through my boots. That was the moment my childhood ended. Red emergency lights transformed familiar corridors into arteries of urgency. I secured my plasma sidearm to my belt and activated the rail rifle slung across my back, feeling the magnetic charge coil synchronize with my pulse. The Crimson Eagle stitched into my nanofiber jacket flared brighter as internal circuits responded to combat protocols. I had trained for boarding scenarios, but training lacked the smell of burning insulation and the metallic taste of fear. Richer entered through the forward cargo carriage with the composure of a man who believed himself inevitable. Tall and broad-shouldered, his face marked by scars that looked less like injuries and more like declarations, he carried the weight of 62 conquered trains behind him. His cybernetic eye glowed amber, scanning, calculating, dismissing resistance before it fully formed. He did not shout orders. His presence was enough. Combat spilled through narrow passageways where gravity fluctuated as both trains adjusted acceleration to maintain track integrity. Plasma bursts carved molten scars into walls that had once framed children's artwork and community announcements. Claire moved beside me with reckless precision, her braids snapping behind her as she fire-controlled shots that drove Scorpion raiders backward. She fought not for vengeance, but for the future she insisted existed beyond the glass. I saw neighbors fall, their bodies carried away by automated med drones that moved with indifferent efficiency. I realized then that survival on the train had always required someone else to lose. We forced Scorpion to retreat through coordinated detachment protocols, overriding their clamp sequences and triggering explosive bolts along the junction corridor. The separation thundered like a collapsing mountain, and Scorpion drifted momentarily before re-engaging the parallel track. Richard paused at the threshold before retreating, his amber gaze locking onto mine across drifting smoke. He did not need to speak his avow. It etched itself into my memory without words. Scorpion peeled away into the distance, but it did not disappear. It lingered at the edge of visibility, a shadow pacing prey. In the aftermath, we counted losses and repaired fractures in both hull and spirit. Jack remained in the engine core chamber longer than anyone else, his thin hands hovering over holographic projections of the decentralized quantum network. At 80 years old, Jack was older than most living aboard the Red Eagle. He had memorized the rhythm of the train's systems the way others memorize prayers. We captured one of Scorpion's engineers during the chaos, an older man whose fear manifested not as defiance but exhaustion. Under interrogation, fragments of truth surfaced with reluctant clarity. Jack stood at the periphery of the chamber while the engineer described projections layered across our windows. The landscapes we admired were curated illusions generated to preserve morale while Earth's biosphere had long since collapsed. I refused to believe it at first. The forests we saw were too detailed, the oceans too reflective. Jack finally spoke, his voice trembling with the burden of withheld knowledge. The decentralized quantum network harvested kinetic energy from perpetual motion and biofeedback from inhabitants, sustaining life support through dynamic equilibrium. Centuries ago, when ecological collapse became irreversible, humanity retreated into motion. Stopping meant destabilizing the grid that regulated atmosphere, water recycling, temperature control, and food production. The illusion of Earth's recovery was a psychological safeguard embedded into the network's visual output. Hope was engineered because despair risked stagnation, and stagnation meant extinction. I approached the window and pressed my palm against reinforced glass. For a fraction of a second, the lush forest beyond flickered into skeletal ruins under a gray sky devoid of life before correcting itself into greenery. Claire watched the glitch with widening eyes. The belief she carried like armor fractured silently. If Earth was dead, then what were we racing toward? Scorpion returned during our ascent to the moon, its silhouette rising beneath us along the luminous track that curved into space. The Earth below shrank into a dim sphere wrapped in artificial glow. Acceleration increased as we entered orbital transition, gravity shifting unpredictably within corridors. Combat erupted once more as Scorpion forced detachment at the rear habitation sectors. Zero-gravity firefights transformed carriages into drifting labyrinths where magnetic boots strained for purchase. Detached cargo modules spun into open space, glittering debris scattering against the black canvas of the void. Claire sealed a hull breach near the lunar transfer corridor while 23 civilians remained trapped beyond a compromised bulkhead. Pressure differential howled like an animal desperate to escape. I faced a decision that compressed eternity into seconds. I could override the seal and reach Claire, risking decompression that would claim the civilians, or maintain the barrier and condemn her to isolation within a detaching carriage. She looked at me through the viewport, her expression calm in a way that broke something inside my chest. She believed still, even knowing Earth was gone. The carriage disengaged and drifted toward the moon's gravity well, carrying Claire and the echo of every childhood promise we had shared. I maintained the seal and saved the 23. Richard intercepted me in the vacuum corridor, subduing me with calculated precision. As he restrained my arms, the moon loomed outside like an indifferent witness to human choice. Both trains stabilized and redirected toward Mars, their luminous tracks bridging darkness as if nothing sacred had been lost. Mars rose from the void like a wound that refused to close. Its surface burned red beneath thin atmosphere, storms spiraling across plains that had never known footsteps from those born in motion. Richard confined me within Scorpion's command carriage, confident that control equaled victory. He underestimated the resilience born from grief and revelation. Jack initiated a destabilization protocol within the decentralized network, rerouting kinetic dependency thresholds and introducing autonomous life support contingencies. He gambled that centuries-old safeguards could be rewritten mid-flight. Allies from the Red Eagle infiltrated Scorpion through maintenance conduits, disabling resource siphons and restoring control of our engine output. When they placed my rail rifle back into my hands, I felt something beyond anger guiding me. The final confrontation unfolded along elevated Martian tracks suspended above Crimson Plains. Carriages tore free during combat, crashing into dust storms that swallowed metal and memory alike. Richard refused retreat even as Scorpion's core destabilized. He lunged forward with the fury of a man who defined himself by motion and conquest, unwilling to exist in a world where stopping did not mean death. I disengaged his stabilization harness during the collapse, watching as Scorpion derailed and shattered against Mars in a storm of fire and fractured steel. The sound carried across the plains like a final confession. For the first time in recorded history, the Red Eagle decelerated without catastrophic failure. Jack's override decoupled velocity from survival thresholds, allowing life support to sustain itself without perpetual motion. Silence descended slowly like dust settling after centuries of storm. The train stopped. Doors that had never opened to open air unlocked with hesitant clicks. Cold Martian wind brushed against my face as I stepped beyond the threshold. The ground did not tremble beneath me. It held. I knelt and pressed my palm into red soil that felt both alien and inevitable. Claire's belief echoed within the quiet that replaced engine roar. In the distance, faint energy domes shimmered through dust haze. Towers rose where no track extended, and silhouettes moved deliberately across the horizon. Mars was not empty. Somewhere beyond sight, another civilization had chosen stillness long before we dared. I rose with quiet hope expanding in the space grief had carved. The train had stopped, but humanity had not. The horizon awaited, unmoving and infinite.